What is up, everyone? Welcome to Sitting with Sean, episode number 22. Today, I've got a very amazing guest, a very awesome guest, Abby Frutchey. How you doing, Abby?
Hey Sean, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I've had a very busy day, meeting, pick up my kid, and now we're here.
Always
And now,
grinding.
yeah. We gotta prioritize our day, and that's what this whole portion of my life is about: is prioritizing my day. It's pretty awesome, pretty crazy. So, Abby, would you like to give a formal introduction of yourself?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So thanks for having me on, Sean. I'm really excited to be here. And hey, everyone out there that's watching and following this podcast, my name's Abby Frutchey, and I live in one of the smallest towns, about as far east as you can get in the United States. So it's really, I laugh when I talk to Sean because we are literally almost at opposite ends of the country. I live about 30 miles east of the easternmost point of the United States. So we are at the end of the earth and or at the US. But I'm just really excited to be here. I'm a person in recovery. I'm a woman in recovery. And what that means is that I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I'm a social worker, I'm an active part of my community, I'm a treatment court alumni, and I get to be here with you tonight and share about my journey and what recovery looks like to me. So I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on here, and once again, thank you for being on here. Yeah, I met Abby because we got this National Treatment Court alumni going on, right? That's pretty cool. And I heard her name float around, in some of our Alaska groups, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. There's people like me out there. Well, not like me because you don't got a beard, but um, but there's people like me that have gone through what I've gone through and are at points in our life that that we're at in the same breath. So I was like, man, that's pretty cool. And then I met her kind of informally over Zoom, and we had some meetings and stuff like that, and it was cool to interact with somebody from a whole, she said it, the opposite end of the country. And yeah, and and then I went down to Nashville for the National Association for Drug Court Professionals conference. That was amazing. And
That
then
was like, yeah, that was off the charts. Amazing.
absolutely, and I met Abby in person there, and I met her husband. Two amazing people. I just gotta say right off the bat, you guys are simply amazing. You guys are awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So NADCP. Let's talk about that real quick before we get into it. What has your experience been with NADCP? I know mine, but I'll share mine after yours.
Yeah, well, I feel like there's so much I could share about like what even led me to NADCP. So for any of the listeners that don't know, or Sean had mentioned it just a second ago, NADCP stands for National Association of Drug Court Professionals, and they are the national association that leads training and advocacy for treatment courts and specialty courts across the United States. But I guess my journey with treatment courts probably started 17 years ago when I found myself involved in the justice system and entered into a treatment court. And I know we'll get to that part of my story, but it's pretty amazing to think that 17 years ago, I was a criminal defendant standing before a judge, sick within my addiction that led me to that place that I was standing at that time. And 17 years later, now I have an opportunity to, I sit on the board of directors for the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. And now with the National Treatment Court Alumni Association, we're connected closely with NADCP in supporting alumni efforts. So, I mean, that's like a high level, quick overview, but there's 17 years of story in the middle of that, that with
Yeah,
where it got
yeah.
today.
I will say I've never felt more important than when I was at NADCP. And I'll say that because we were there and we kind of, I mean, we had our little gathering room that we met at, but Chris came down and he just made us feel at home. He said, if there's anything you need, we'll take care of it. And I've heard, me myself, I've heard, if there's anything that you need, we'll take care of it. and I kind of discredited. I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe not so much. Maybe I'll tell you that first time we were like, hey, we need paper to write on, and he was like, on it. 5 minutes later, there's paper to be written on. He was like, hey, don't wait in lines for lunch. Come up to our presidential suite where everybody meets. And I'm like, I feel important. And that was awesome. And I don't think I've ever been in a capacity where I feel that importance, shown toward people that have graduated, alumni, graduates from the vet court, or sorry, not vet court, but therapeutic courts. And
You
so that
are
was simply
important.
amazing.
You are
Yeah,
important.
we're
It's like there's so much value in our experience, and not just our experience, but our contributions to the field and to this work and to the advancement of justice and justice reform. Like we have so much to contribute, and we are important, and it feels good to be
absolutely.
recognized for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are some really cool experiences that I got to experience when I was there at NADCP. Obviously got to see screening of some films that haven't been put out yet that are just mind blowing, simply amazing. We got to meet some celebrities, which is cool. You got to hang out with Cookie Monster. How amazing was that?
I got hugs.
You got hugs from Cookie. That's pretty awesome. And we got to bond with people that we in normal everyday life we wouldn't get to.
Yeah.
I was rubbing elbows with Judge Dugan, the first judge that created Therapeutic Vet Court. That is amazing. That literally right there, he is the foundation of what created the track I went through, and that was just, I got to say thank you for creating and continuing this program that I was a part of, and it was pretty awesome. So thank you for everything that you do for NADCP and for alumni. I really mean that.
Oh my goodness. I have to chuckle every time I get thanked because honestly, I feel that same level of gratitude that you feel. Well, let me pause for a minute. Like, I feel like, why me? Like, and this will lead into, I think, the story of addiction and recovery. Like, why me? Why, uh, a single mom at one point in time that was just as involved, that lives at the end of the United States in this really rural town. We don't even have stoplights where I live. Why me? Why am I now part of this, and what led to this? And I think that is what I want to make sure I touch on today, that power of recovery and the power of possibilities and the power of connection. Like us together tonight, how did that happen? Like that happened through recovery and through our journeys of recovery, and it's just so amazing when we reflect back on all of the experiences and opportunities and connections that are made through this journey. It's just phenomenal.
Absolutely, yeah. I found myself within the past few years saying, "Why me?" A year into recovery, a year post graduation, I found myself, "Why me?" Like, what is so special about me? And it really was some soul searching that it's nothing special about me. It's what I'm a part of. And what I'm a part of is something greater than myself, greater than you, greater than everybody involved. And that's what I had to realize is that none of this is about me. This podcast isn't about me. This podcast is not about notoriety for myself. And I've had to tell people that, like, they say, "Oh, you're doing a good job on the podcast." I'm like, "Look, this has nothing to do with me. I'm the catalyst to get other people's stories out there. That's it.
Yeah.
I help people along the way, but it's not about me. It's about something so much greater." And so that's what I had to find out for myself, is that it's not me,
Yeah.
not me at all, and it's amazing. It's amazing.
I,
So
I feel that same way about my role, as I often say, like, I'm if I can be a bridge for other alumni to get have these opportunities and experience, if I can be the voice, carry the voice of alumni to those that need to hear it, like, I am honored to do that. And that's just an amazing feeling. But yeah, I'm just another like bozo on the bus. I was told early on, like, I'm one of many, and there's so many of us out there that just have amazing skills and qualities that we bring to the recovery field and into this journey.
Absolutely. All right, Abby, we're gonna go ahead and get into it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All right. So what was it like in your active addiction prior to where you are now?
Wow. When I reflect on that, it's been a few days. It's been my recovery started. My recovery journey was started June 15th, 2005. So it's been a few 24 hours now, which one makes me feel old, and two makes me feel really grateful. But what was it like? It was like being on a jetliner that was headed straight into the ground. Um, I was I was at a point in my life where nothing else mattered, except for my feeding my addiction. And let me step back a little bit. So, growing up, I grew up in a household with a dad that suffered from alcoholism. And, I always thought, like, I'll never be like him. And I think a lot of us, when we experience it in our families, we feel that way. Like, I will never be like him. I'll never put my mother through that. I'll never do any of that. And then when my journey into substance use started at age 12, I was in the seventh grade the first time I started using marijuana and pills and just experimenting. Um, it was different. Like, I convinced myself that it was different and that it was just about being wild. I like wanted to be wild. I wanted to be that risk taker. Like, that's who I was. I wanted to be kind of that person. But what happened was, wow, I had absolutely no idea at age 12 that I was so susceptible to falling in love with it and that feeling right away. And it wasn't just the feeling of the substance use, but it was the feeling that came being part of something that I thought was so risky. And it like changed the trajectory of who I was and what I did at 12 years old. And because my family was struggling with my dad's alcoholism, like, they just had no clue. They just
Yeah.
didn't suspect it and they had no clue. And that was the start of a 10-year journey down a dark black hole that eventually led to me being arrested. Um, but in that journey, one of the things that we often say is that we take people hostage. And I did. Like, there were people that did not sign up to be part of my bullshit, and they were part of it. They had to experience my lying, my stealing. I got fired from jobs. People depended on me, and I wasn't dependable. My family, they loved me, but whew, they they were done. They weren't lending me any more money. They just couldn't. Um, but the depths of it, and this is an important part of my story that it took me a long time to talk about, Sean, and I'm happy to share it with all of your listeners today because it's something that I don't think is shared enough. Um, I had an unplanned pregnancy when I was 21, and I was in the depths of my addiction. And my pregnancy did not curb my substance use. We know there's some women that actually statistics say about 30% of women who are pregnant with substance use disorder will stop substance use or enter treatment right away. So pregnancy in itself will stop it in 30% of women, but it didn't with me. And actually, the immense shame and guilt that I felt from my use actually led to it getting way worse. And the height of my substance use was throughout my pregnancy. I got sneakier with some people. Others were very well aware and were a part of my behavior. Um, and I justified the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And it was at the time, it was pharmaceuticals, it was Oxycontin. I live in like many rural communities that were hit with the overprescribing of Oxycontin, like where I live, we made the map. Like it was, the overprescribing was abundant, and that's where my addiction led me, was to the Oxycontin. I gave birth to my son, July 17th, 2004. And I'd like to say he was a beautiful, healthy baby boy, and he was beautiful, but he was he was experiencing the impact of my substance use. And so I gave birth to a substance exposed infant, and he had to be treated in the neonatal intensive care unit at a hospital 2 hours away. And it took me 10 years to talk openly about this in my recovery circles. Like I'd talk about anything that had to do with my addiction, but I didn't talk about this because it hits me right here. Um, I can remember, I mean, again, he just turned 18, and I can still remember being in that hospital, and I stayed with him, or I stayed in my own room, but I was able to stay at the hospital with him 2 hours away. But I would go in the bathroom and I would use, because that's what I knew how to deal with how shitty I felt for my addiction and what I was, exposing my son to. And so it just perpetuated my addiction. And at the time, there's so much stigma related to addiction. Like I was an outcast. And certainly as a pregnant woman, society said, you just need to stop. Like, you don't love your child. If you loved your child, you'd stop. That's what I said to my dad all those years before. I said that to him. And so that kept ringing in my head. And the only way I could numb the voices was to continue to use. And I did for the next 11 months of his life. And my use I was selling drugs, selling Oxycontin, and it caught up to me. And I'm so grateful it caught up to me, because I'll tell you, there were so many times I wanted it to be different. Like when someone says like they're not willing, like I don't believe that. Like I wanted it so bad, but I didn't know how to tell people I needed it. And I just kept myself surrounded with people that were like me, that were sick in their addictions. And I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to stop. And it was on June 15th, 2005 that I was ultimately arrested and incarcerated. And it was, so my son's birthday was July 17th, 2005. That was his first birthday. And I sat in jail up until 3 days before his first birthday. And as a mom, for the first time getting some clarity in a jail cell, thinking that I was going to miss my son's first birthday, I knew I need this to be different. I can't live my life like this. And that's when treatment court was offered to me. And that's when my journey of recovery began.
Oh, that's impactful. I remember you said something at the very beginning about how you told yourself that you would never be like your dad. And I found myself saying that. And I had a guest recently say I lived in a lot of not yets. And he said I haven't done it yet. And I found that relatively familiar too, is because I lived my life with a lot of not yets. But also that lie that I fed myself that I'm not going to be like my dad. Yeah, did you find some point in your life, in your active addiction, where you looked in the mirror and you said, damn, I'm just like him?
Yeah, well, if you've been in a jail cell and you see that little like plastic mirror that they give you. It's not even glass, and it's
Yeah.
blurry. I
Yeah.
remember looking in that and having a moment of both clarity and immense sadness and immense relief to say, I don't need to be like this anymore. But it wasn't until further in my recovery that I was able to connect with him because he entered recovery. That's another part of the story. And to apologize and to say, now I know what you were going through. And all those things, all those nasty, hurtful things I said to you of why don't you love me? How could you do this? Now I know it wasn't you doing it.
Yeah.
It was that demon, it was that demon we call addiction driving, driving the train. And, but yeah, that mirror, well, I can remember that sight, and it was 17 years later. Like I can recall it so clearly.
Yeah, it's scary. I remember when it happened to me, I was in my bathroom and I was cleaning my face off and like I always for my whole adult life was like I'm never gonna be like him and I hate him, like all the things that we tell ourselves, right? So I just can't do it. And I was washing my face and I came up and I put the towel on my face and I looked and it was him staring back at me and I was like, oh my god, like the most terrifying thing, because in that moment I realized I'm him. Everything made sense. And here's the crazy part: I sound just like him. I look just like him. I mean, minus the he doesn't have a beard either, and he's balding. I'm kind of balding, but not that bad, not to that degree. But I look just like him. I sound just like him. We have our same mannerisms, and I was like, holy crap, I am him. But I also, later on in my recovery, I found out that I got the good parts of him too, not just the bad ones. I got the resiliency, I got the tenacity, I've got the empathy and the compassion for other people, and I just didn't inherit the terrible things. And that's what a lot of people don't realize when they look at their parents, is that we do inherit those good things, not just the bad things. Like we see those bad things, but we let them overshadow the good things about our parents.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, right? And I was a teenager, like just starting out my own journey of use when my dad's alcoholism like peaked. And I don't know, maybe for me it was a perfect diversion for me to go down in my own deep hole. And one of the things that just was never shared with me that I think is so important now that I have kids, an 18-year-old and I have a 13-year-old and 11-year-old stepchildren, is to talk about that, like to talk about that predisposition, like it's in your blood, like you're going to be at a time in your life where you're faced with making these decisions. You will be. It's not even a question of maybe, like you will be, whether it's alcohol or any other substance. And and I just say, like, you got to know it's in your veins. You will love it when you try it. And that's where the risk is. And at 18 years old, my son knows the story, the journey of my active addiction. And it took a long time, and it took a gentleness, and it took like time to be able to tell him the whole story, or to be open with him to what's appropriate for his age. And he says to me, Mom, I will never pick anything up. And he goes, because you got into recovery because of me, and out of respect for that, I will never try anything. Now, I hope that's the way it always goes, but I know, right? Like
Yeah.
life is life, and there's curiosity, but it's been made clear to him, like it's in your veins. You're going to love it when you try it, and that's where the risk is.
Yeah. How scary is that as a parent?
It's like I've had a lot of sleepless nights, and I'm just grateful that our children, my husband and I, like our children, like aren't doing what I was doing at 12, 14, 16. And my husband, as you said, is a person in recovery and a treatment court graduate. And we talk candidly with our kids, appropriately, but we talk openly. Like age appropriate, like down to our 11-year-old, alcohol and vaping, and our older kids, it's marijuana and other alcohol and hard drugs. Like we talk about, like, it's going to be offered to you. Like, what do you do? Like, these are the risk factors, and how are you going to navigate it, and how are you going to talk to your own friends when they're trying it? And there's no handbook for that.
No, it's not, and that's a hard conversation to have, especially with your kids. I know I got mine. Mine are quite a bit younger, and I try to talk to them age appropriate with certain things. My oldest, she's in middle school right now, and so I try to talk to her, and she's like, "Dad, I'm never gonna touch that." I was like, "Yeah, let's hope you don't. Let's hope you don't. I can't stop you, but what I can do is I can be here when you are ready." And that's terrifying because I look at myself and I'm like, yeah, like, and my biological daughter, the one that I seen when I was in Nashville, I feel bad for her. I joke around and I say she looks just like me, so I feel bad for her because later on in life she's gonna be a beautiful girl, but I'm scared for her because it's in her genes, like you said. It's a genetic disposition that we have, and that she has, and that your kids have, but your kids have amazing parents. I don't know if you've heard about them or not, but those kids have amazing parents, and I think that they're in good hands.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Sean. And but at the end of the day, we know that addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful, right? Like
Yeah.
amazing power parents or not. And I think about, like, that serenity prayer, like what is within my control and what is not. And I can't let those things that aren't within my control just take up space in my head. I can educate, I can support, I can be a good role model, and expose my kids to the recovery community and to all of the amazing people that I get to, my husband and I get to spend our lives with. And so they see that and they hear the stories. Our 13-year-old daughter is actually part of the Maine Recovery Advocacy Project youth group, and she works with other youth. She's 13 years old, and she works through the recovery centers to promote youth activities. And it's not necessarily recovery focused, but it's youth focused. So they're doing things to support the recovery centers, and it helps them be connected to the centers in our community. And it's a really cool thing to watch. And they get to hear the stories of other youth that have gone through parental substance use. And some of those stories are really hard to hear. Some of the youth have lost parents. Their parents are currently incarcerated. Um, they don't have a relationship with their parents. And so our daughter gets to interact with a lot of youth that have had different experiences. And we talk a lot about that too. Like, what's that like to hear the experiences of other kids? And I think that helps keep her
Yeah.
passionate about what recovery is and about this work that we do. So that's why we call ourselves a family in recovery, because we're all kind of connected in some way.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty amazing. So obviously you said that you got incarcerated and you entered into a therapeutic court, um, and that's where your journey began. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I did what any good early treatment court participant would do. I lied, I was sneaky, I didn't really know follow the rules. I rode the line for about 2 months. I never picked up, but I don't know how I didn't. I mean, I was put myself in some really risky situations. I was in a relationship with someone who was still in active addiction, and I hid that because I'm codependent too, like the good child of a alcoholic. Um, and so I did it my way, right? Like I did what I thought, like, I'll just follow the rules. I was pretty good at that, like looking good, putting on a good show. But over time, over those first couple of months in my early treatment court experience, the people I was spending time with, they were getting incarcerated and terminated from the program. They were picking up new charges. And I knew, like, you got to do something or you're going with them. And I didn't want it. I really didn't want it. Again, I just didn't know any different. Like, that was my life. Um, a woman came into my life, I'm going to call her by name. Maybe I won't call her by name to protect her anonymity. I will just say a woman came into my life that I would have never in a million years thought that we would have a connection because we were nothing alike. I was 22, she was 50. I struggled with opiate addiction, she struggled with alcoholism. And to this day, I just saw her yesterday, actually, again, gave her a big hug. She became a second mom to me. And it wasn't because my mom couldn't be a mom. My mom put up with a lot from me, and she was very supportive through my recovery. But I built a relationship with someone who walked maybe a different path, but walked a path of recovery. And she said, whatever you do, you show up and you don't pick up. Anything else, it's okay. You just got to do those things. And for the first time in my life, I stopped playing the games. I stopped saying, like, I knew best because I really knew that I didn't. And I just listened to her. And I became like a student. And I did everything she did. And her daughters at the time were a little bit younger than me, and they would watch my son, who was a year old. They would watch him for like babysit him so I could go to meetings. And I would drive with her, and we'd pick up other people, and we'd have a meeting before the meeting. And I'd go to her house and we'd watch Jag. Do you ever remember Jag? It's like the
Yeah.
attorney, Navy attorney. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't like Jag, but we would watch it and we would smoke lots of cigarettes and drink lots of coffee. And I was safe because I wasn't alone. Because I don't know if you can relate to this, but I didn't know how to be with myself. Like, I didn't know how to go to the grocery store sober. I didn't know how to like vacuum my living room sober. I like just didn't even know how to be with myself. And so for many months in my early recovery, I wasn't with myself. I was at her house every morning. I'd get up and I'd go to her house and drink coffee, smoke cigarettes, right? And go to meeting later in the day. And I did it over and over again. And it seems simple, but she kept saying, whatever you do, just show up and don't pick up, and more will be revealed. And she revealed so much more to me. I don't know if I would have made it that first year without her. And she has three beautiful daughters who became like sisters to me. Like, I fit like right in this between the oldest daughter and the middle daughter, like age wise. So I became like this pseudo sister to these three girls. And still to this day, 17 years later, we have like these great relationships and look at them as family. And it just kept getting better. But I surrounded myself with people who wanted it, who were doing it, and were putting in the work to their recovery. You know, and a lot of those slogans, some people aren't a big slogan person, but man, that was like all my brain could handle. Like those 3-word slogans. That was what got me through. Time takes time, let it go. Oh my word. If I had every time she said, just let it go, Abby, let it go. Because I'd get hung up on this small shit that was a perfect excuse to go back out and use in my mind. And she helped me through with those little things. And the groups helped me through. And I did that time after time, day after day. And it became like a part of my life. If you didn't notice, I'm an extrovert. I thrive off being around people.
Yeah.
And I did all the things, whether it was game nights or cookouts or anniversary parties that we went to for recovery anniversary. We traveled. I live in a county that's the size of Rhode Island, but there's only 31,000 people in the entire county. Like, it's geographically big. So we'd travel across the county to go to meetings, and it saved my life. Like, it saved my life. Getting connected, building relationships, and no longer like driving the car myself. Like, that's what got me in recovery. But it was treatment courts that got me connected to that. The really tough stuff, like I was telling you about, navigating those immense feelings related to my addiction through my pregnancy, like that was deep clinical work. Like I needed to work with someone that could really help me navigate that, because that was not something that I talked about in my peer group. It was not something that I talked openly to my sponsor about. Like I needed some professional clinical support, and my treatment provider was phenomenal. She helped me through that. She helped me realize I wasn't broken, that I was worthy, that I was a good mom. You know, like she helped me realize all of that in my journey, and that there were endless possibilities. Like this notion of like shooting for the moon, like I didn't used to think that way. Like I
Yeah.
used to think like people were either lucky or they just like had opportunity laid out for them. Like I didn't know that I was capable of doing these things. And I slowly started to realize that. And once I got bit by that bug, I tell you what, Sean, I was like, there's nothing that isn't possible. And that's been pretty much my motto for the last 17 years. Um, and I've made it to the White House. You know, I've married my best friend. You're right, like all of these things that I reflect back, I'm like, how, what, why? Like, sky's the limit. There's nothing that's not possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, you hit on something that's kind of near and dear to me, and that's that aha moment where everything starts to click. And you talked about your friend that that said, don't pick up and keep coming. I had one of those, and it came in the oddest form, and it came from my dad. And my dad was in recovery. And you talked about your dad was in recovery at one point. My dad was in recovery too. And whenever I'd call him and I'd have a problem, because he was like one of my biggest supports. We have a great relationship now. When I call him, I say, "Hey man, like I'm having this problem." He'd be like, "Page 417 in the big book," and I'm
And
like,
acceptance is the answer to all my problems today.
"Yeah." And I was like, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear an answer from you, my dad, not a mockingbird. And so I'd call him again, page 417. Call him again, page 417. Finally, he was like, "Open up to page 417." And I was like, "I don't want to hear this from you. I want my dad." And he was like, "Page 417. I don't want to hear this." He's like, "Dude, do it now. I promise you, it's going to change your life." So open it up. And I read it 3 times out loud. And first time I read it, and I was like, "Oh, well, this don't mean anything to me." And the second time I was like, eh. The last time I was like, wow, absolutely powerful stuff. Stuff that a book that was written in the 50s is still relevant to today. And the fact that he gave me that gift, I'm eternally grateful. And it sounds like you're grateful for your
Yeah.
friend that gave you a gift.
I'm
And
beyond grateful. Yeah.
yeah, and it seems like she was one of the people that in a way saved your life.
I definitely wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be sitting in the seat. I wouldn't be at this place in my life if it weren't for her. And, you know, that makes me like, I'm a big believer that everything happens for a reason, even the tough stuff. And I've come to like, she was like your dad. When you were saying that, I was like, oh my word. She always sent me to acceptance is the answer to all of my problems today. When I am disturbed, right? Like we can
Yeah.
recite it because we read it
Yeah.
so many times. And it made me get to a place where I realized that, or I came to believe, this is my personal beliefs, that everything happens for a reason, and the good stuff, but also the tough stuff. And it turned my focus to start to look at like, what is it about this tough stuff that is teaching me a lesson, that is maybe setting me in a different direction because I need to be in a different direction, that is slowing me down because I need to be slowed down. Like, to me, that is the universe, higher power, whatever you would like to refer, how you'd like to refer to it, saying, like, you don't need to be in control all the time. Because when you're in control, actually, sometimes things don't go that well.
A lot of the times
And
they don't go that well.
yeah. So that's where I came to, like, this is like, and people came into my life for a reason. And I'm like, I got to tell you a quick funny story, Sean, is I actually asked her sponsor to be my sponsor. And I remember it. She was like an older lady. Everyone adored her. And I asked her to be my sponsor at a meeting one night. And she said, well, actually, no, I'm not going to be your sponsor. And I was crushed. Like, I didn't like hearing the word no. I was just
Yeah.
crushed. She was, but I want to introduce you to someone. And she introduced me to my friend. And I wasn't happy because I was like, this wasn't who I asked. This isn't like I was asking you to be my sponsor.
Yeah.
But look, when I stop being in charge of things, beautiful stuff happens. And it was exactly the way it was meant to be.
Absolutely. When we relinquish that control,
Yeah.
it everything starts to work in our favor. Even though we may not see it working in our favor, it will work in our favor. You talked about holistic treatment, and that's something I firmly believe in. Now, not everybody needs holistic treatment, but a good majority of us do, especially those of us in therapeutic court. I know it worked for me. So, what did holistic treatment look like for you? You said that you're in counseling and stuff like that, but what did it look like for you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so a little bit, something I didn't share is I'm also a clinician. So I firmly, like, I believe in the power of clinical treatment. I believe in connecting mind, body, and spirit. I believe in peer work, right? Like, there's a whole continuum of what we need. But um, for me, it was really about one, like going like the school of addiction. Like, I needed to learn about what was happening up here, because for years all I did was consider it a moral failing. I was useless, I was worthless, I was doing all the wrong things. And when I actually started to learn about what addiction was, like, that was like my starting point in therapeutic court, was just getting educated. And that gave me some aha moments. That gave me the, like, I'm not broken. You mean like it actually has changed my brain? Like, okay, so when I'm impulsive and it wasn't excusing the behavior, but it was explaining it. So I came to learn, like, when I have those intense cravings, that's a real thing. Like, that's a real thing in my brain. It's not just me being a weak person. And I need real skills to be able to navigate it. So my early experience in treatment court was, through treatment, that was that psychoeducation. Like, that was what I needed to get grounded in understanding addiction. It was later in court, in therapeutic court, that I went deeper. I had experienced traumas earlier in my life, as a young woman, that certainly played a role in my substance use and emotions I was trying to detach from. As I had shared, just experiencing a lot of those negative emotions related to my experience of being a pregnant woman, facing addiction. And I had a treatment provider, and I will mention her by name. She's no longer with us. Her name was Terry. And she was phenomenal because she was so compassionate. It was outside of my peer network within the groups, within the recovery groups. It was the first time I'd connected with a professional that I didn't feel like was belittling me or demeaning me or questioning anything that I said to them. She created space for me to feel my feelings and to validate them, and help me find ways to navigate them without saying, like, we'll just get rid of them. Like, they're going to be there and they're going to come up, and there's different experience in life that will bring them back up. But I will walk with you through that, and I will teach you skills, ways to redirect your thoughts so you can navigate those. And that also helped me with my relationship with spirituality, with the universe, with nature. Because for me, I needed a calming of the mind. And so that helped connect me to a way to get grounded and just find some calming skills. But Terry passed away far beyond her time, before her time, excuse me, because of an illness. And she had such a profound impact on many community members here in Washington County. And I'll just be forever grateful for how she helped me heal parts of me that I didn't know were capable of being healed.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry that she passed away. I'm sorry for your loss. That's
Yeah.
terrible. Um, yeah, one of the things when I was when I first started my counseling, my counselor straight out the gate was like, "Hey man, can you control your emotions and your feelings?" I'm like, "Yeah, dude, I can control those." He's like, "Well, you're a magician because you're the only person I know that can do that." And I just kind of stopped and looked at him, and I was like, "Oh, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "You can't control any of that." He's like, "That's natural reaction." And that's the first time that I heard that I found out that like there's no physical way for me to control those, right? And a lot of people say, "Oh, I can't control my anger." Well, yeah, you can't. It's a naturally occurring thing. And so a lot of men, that's one of the things that I try to break the stigma when it comes to is that human beings, we can't control how we feel or the emotions that spur up because those are naturally occurring things. There are triggers that are involved, and you know the only thing that we can control, and this is what he said next. He was like, the only thing you can control is how you react to it and
Yeah.
how you handle it. And I was like, what? It is that simple? I have overcomplicated this my whole life.
Yeah, because we always try to control the emotion and then we couldn't. And then we blame that on whatever like behavior we ended up
Yeah.
with, right? Which was usually probably pretty self destructive or
Yeah.
hurtful to others. Yeah.
Yeah. And my prime example that I give people is, when I talk to them about this and say I can't control my emotions, I say, okay, be happy. And they just look at me and I'm like, are you happy yet? They're like, no. I said, exactly. You don't have any power over that. The only power that you have is over how you handle things. And I hope that's a clarifying moment for them to realize, like, holy crap, there's so much in this, like, going on with me that I have to learn how to handle those things and how to cope with them and how to productively work through them, not destructively work through them. And that sounds like when you were talking about what your counselor gave you, I was just kind of like, that sounds just like me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's, like our emotions come from, like, I didn't realize, like, I thought emotions came first. Like, I didn't realize, like, I had a thought before I had an emotion because thoughts are so rapid, right? Like,
Hmm.
I can't, sometimes I don't even know the thoughts I have because they're so rapid and I have multiple at a time. But this is where, I was talking about, like, looking at different ways. Like, this is what 12-step recovery did for me too, like, helped me see the good in things. So I wasn't always like, I could think about things differently. Like how, the saying goes, when I change the way I think of things, the things I think of change. Like
Yeah.
when I started to think about situations differently, I didn't have the same emotional response. And so then I definitely didn't react like emotionally or in a self-destructive way. So that's a lot of the work I've done too. Like just think about it and like don't always go to that destructive thinking. Like whatever it may be, the all or nothing or black or white, right? All those thought patterns that
Hmm.
we learn about, because I went there. If anything, I went to the real victim stance, right? Like
Hmm.
poor me. Or I'd really catastrophize it like it's the end of the world. It's such a big deal when it's really something that I could navigate and handle. So when I change the way I think of things, it changes how I feel about them and ultimately like life's a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely is. Definitely is. So, what does your recovery look like now? 17 years later, what does your recovery look like now?
Wow. Well, first of all, I've had a hard time coming to terms with the fact that I'm like old enough to have 17 years of recovery. I'm like,
Yeah.
how could that be? I'm only 20. Just kidding. But wow, what does recovery look like today? It's a life free of fear, of just being controlled by something that doesn't walk, talk, or breathe, because something I could fit in the palm of my hand controlled my life and my relationships for a long time, and I don't have that anymore. I recovery to me means all of those things that I wasn't before. Like, people can count on me. I like to show the path to others. I my the compassion I have, particularly for pregnant and parenting women, is just like leads me in my work and in my values. And recovery today means that there's nothing that isn't possible. I'll continue to repeat that. My husband and I, we live kind of this, it's not a YOLO life. It's not like you only live once, but we're like, you live. Like, recovery
Yeah.
is about living. We do the things. Like, we do the things. And it's amazing. I got to give him credit. I didn't talk much about Brian, my husband. Like, he's been in this journey with me for 12 years. Him and I began dating before he completed treatment and recovery court. So he was still in the program when him and I started dating. I had been out of the program for about 5 years. And watching his journey of recovery really grow and strengthen, and the freedoms that have come to him and the opportunities that have come to him, and vice versa, and us raising our 3 kids, it's like the energy that we play off each other is just amazing. And we have a lot of similarities in that way that we don't want to take for granted today, because we did that for so many years. And like many of us in the communities that are still riddled with addiction, we see the tremendous impacts and loss of life. And it continues to make us grateful for our recovery. It continues to drive us in wanting to be, part of the solution. And again, it reminds us to be grateful for every moment that we have, because that easily could have been either of us at any time. And it still can be. Here's those not
Yeah.
yets. It still can be if we don't keep our recovery a number one priority.
Absolutely. And keeping your recovery your number one priority, I had to explain that to people that don't suffer addiction and aren't in the same exact spot as I am. And that is the hardest to explain, right? It's hard to look at friends and family members and say, I have I have to go to a meeting because that's what my program looks like today. Or, hey, I've got this recovery walk. Like, I have to do this. And I'm sorry I'm missing something, but I have to do this. I made an engagement to it, and I cannot back out of it. I could, but that's part of my recovery. We work on every facet of our life to improve things. And if we don't put our recovery first, then everything else falls to the wayside. And that's the hardest to explain. I don't know if you've had to face that.
Yeah, I think so many people in recovery face that with families or with loved ones, spouses, their children, right? Like, there were my first year in recovery, there were many nights I did not tuck my son into bed, into his crib, because the meetings were always evening meetings where I live. And so, he was often put to bed by his father or the babysitter. But for me, I knew, right? Like, that was my medicine. Like, that was, you said that was your program. And, this is where I think understanding the stigma that's related with addiction and recovery comes into play, because if I had another chronic health condition and I had to every night do 30 minutes or 60 minutes of treatment to treat my chronic health condition, I probably wouldn't have family question it. If anything, they'd say, "How can I make you comfortable? How can I help?" And as a society, we look at addiction differently, right? This is where it comes in as a moral failing. Now you're choosing your peer group over your family, just like you chose your addiction over your family. And I'm grateful that my family was very supportive and understanding and actually welcomed and embraced it. And now, of course, is very involved in it. But even my mom would come to meetings occasionally to support me, or she'd say, "Why don't you host a cookout at my house?" Because I didn't have a place or
Yeah.
a good place. Um, and so they got involved, and I'm grateful for that. But I know not everyone experiences that. And so, when we think about it from that perspective, it's my program, it's my treatment, and this is what I need. um, Join me or support me, but certainly don't, limit me from the things I need to stay well. And those are tough conversations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Now, how amazing is it to have your dad in recovery?
Yeah. Well, my dad passed away in 2011. However, we got to experience 5 solid years in recovery, and he was in and out of treatments and periods of recovery for a number of years. But when I found recovery, I came to learn that he had had about a year sustained recovery, and we hadn't had contact. And I remember making a phone call to him, and I was bawling, I was crying, and I said, "Dad, I finally know. I know why it was so hard for you." And he just nurtured me, and he wasn't upset that I was mean to him for all those years. He wanted to support me in my recovery, and so I apologized to him. And he lived a few hours from me, but he was working at a men's facility, as a peer counselor, and I'd go down and I'd visit him, and we'd go to meetings together, and it was amazing to see his journey and what he brought to others. He started a woodworking shop, and he that's how he kept his hands busy, and he helped other men. It was a men's facility. He helped other men, learn woodworking skills, and they all looked up to him. He mentored a lot of young men, and, in his untimely passing at age 59, when my sister and I went there, we just spent hours listening to stories that the gentleman shared with us about our dad. And, as emotionally difficult as that was, I was just filled with gratitude that my dad had touched so many lives of men that were starting their journeys in recovery, and for that, I'm grateful.
That's amazing, and I'm sorry for your dad's passing early. That's terrible. I'm sorry. Um, I wish I had that relationship with my dad. My dad, unfortunately, um, he's no longer practicing recovery. So, but you definitely have, well, you had a relationship with your dad that a lot of us strive to get, and I'm glad that you got to experience that. I'm glad you got to hear the stories about how your dad impacted other people's lives. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because in recovery, we try to tone down what we've done for other people and not take pride in that because we don't want to let our pride get in the way.
Yep.
But that's something amazing that you got to hear, and I'm happy that you did get to hear that.
Yeah. I think
Now,
it's that gratitude, right? Like that
yeah,
gratitude that so many people, like that gratitude I have for that special person in my life, the gratitude that you have for the special people in your life that, welcomed you into the journey or showed you, along the way, like hearing that gratitude, and that's a special thing, like
yeah,
knowing that you played a role in their lives.
absolutely. Now the promises, how have they come true in your life?
Oh, it's those promises. Whenever I would hear the promises at the start of a meeting, oh my goodness, I would say, well, I don't know what they're talking about because that surely isn't me. Or when I would see right, like see people laughing or smiling, um, I didn't know how that was going to be possible. And every night that I went to a meeting, we always started the meeting out with the promises. And when I started to see them come true, when I started to feel that freedom, when I started to, lose that feeling of self-loathing, when those promises started to come true, to me, that's when I again realized like anything is possible. I just have to continue in this journey. And just recognizing that everything changes. Nothing stays the same. Time never stands still. Like, how am I going to use all of the seconds that I have in every day?
Mm-hmm.
And they say you'll be amazing before you're halfway through. You'll know a new freedom, and it was hard to understand early on. But I will say now, like that freedom, is like a bird spreading its wings.
Yeah.
Like I know I can soar, and I know there'll be times that I have to swoop and I have to navigate things, but I know I've got that freedom now, as long as I don't pick up. As long as I
Absolutely.
don't pick up.
Absolutely. I like to wake up every morning and think to myself, I'm free. Because yeah, there could be a possibility that things could change, but right now they're not. Nothing is changing.
Mm, yeah.
I'm free. I don't have. I don't have to feel the way that I'm feeling. I don't have to pick up, and I don't have to use. Um, I don't have to maintain that criminal mindset that I had before. Um, I'm free,
Yeah.
and I can choose to be free, or I can choose to enslave myself to this, to our addiction and to our
Yeah.
illness.
It's important that I remember that my addiction, like I choose complete abstinence from all mood and mind altering substances except for caffeine. But there's been times in my life that people say like, yeah, you haven't wanted to have a drink, or like, would you ever consider having a smoke? And say, I know me too well. Over all these years, I've learned me, and I
Yeah.
know, right? Like, yeah, like one is never enough, and 100, right? Like, or 100's never enough. One's too many. 100's never enough. Um, but I also have to remember that my disease of addiction is not just always about putting that substance in my body. Like,
Yeah.
I can still get back to that like addictive thinking if I let myself. And so that's something that probably even more than picking up, I feel pretty confident about my ability not to pick up. Very confident in my ability not to pick up or choose not to pick up today. But it's this that can sometimes get destructive again. And so I have to keep myself in check. And that's by staying connected by other people in recovery, staying involved in all of the recovery work that I do, reading books that promote, just personal development and personal growth and challenge my thinking. Like that stuff's important for me, staying grounded to nature.
Hmm.
Because it's not always about the drink or the drug, it's about this.
Yeah.
And if I don't take care of this, ultimately, that's when a drink or a drug could come into play.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I always told myself, and this was kind of like a backstop for me. I said, if I get to that point where I even start to consider that it's a choice, that's a viable choice, there's something wrong. I need to check myself, and thank my higher power that I haven't gotten to that point yet, and I hope I never get to that point. Um, but I do find that you know it's very powerful when you vocalize like that you're having cravings. For me, I've only had one time where I was like it was severe, where it was like onset, and I vocalized it, and it gave me, it made me feel better, and it was freeing. And I don't know, have you been through that?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, I, particularly the first 5 years, I think, like whether it was a dream or whatever it was, right? Like that physical feeling you get for a craving. And um, I described it as I have to tell on myself, because if I don't
Mm.
tell on myself, this is
Yeah.
where my thinking starts to unravel. And I had an experience where a family member had a medical situation and they were sent home with narcotic pain medication. And I was literally this close to it, right? Like I had it in my hand and I put it down. I was 2 years in recovery. 2 years. I was so active in recovery. Everyone would call me, right? Like, you're a recovery rock star, which I'm not. Like, I don't like those sort of labels. But like that, I was the person in recovery that was just so active. And in like 0.1 second, I had so many thoughts. I could take it, no one would know what is one. I had all of these thoughts run through my mind. And what did I do? I went to a meeting and I immediately told on myself because I said, if I don't, my brain's going to take me there and I'm going to justify the hell out of it. And that felt good to say it. And there were other people too that you could see, like, it felt good to hear it, because sometimes it's hard to acknowledge that, especially the longer you're in recovery, right? Because there's this expectation, like, you're the recovery rock star or you're doing all the right things. I'm a person in recovery. I'm another bozo on the bus, right? Like, I put my shoes on the same way as you every day. Like, I still need to practice all of this because I'm just as susceptible. And that experience for me just reminded me is anytime I have those thoughts, I need to tell on myself, because if I keep that shit a secret, it's not good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I had a moment kind of like yours. I had come home for the first time since being in therapeutic court, and I was walked in my roommate's old room. He hadn't cleaned it out, so I was like, okay, well, I gotta clean it. I start cleaning it, and I open up the closet, and there's bottles just everywhere. And I was like, that was the first time I was ever put in a position that I was like tempted. I was like, oh no, oh goodness. And I just, the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm like, God, grant me the serenity. and I ended up throwing them all away, and I put them, I put them in a bag, put them in the trash can, went right out to the curb, and I ended up going to a meeting after that, and I was like, I got to get this out. Because I felt like all kinds of shame and guilt, because I was like, I shouldn't be feeling like this. I've been sober X amount of time. Hey, it doesn't matter how long I've been sober. I'm still human. I'm still a person in recovery.
Yeah, we are. And that's, I think, where we have to humble ourselves, is that we are, people in recovery before, anything. Like, I'm a person, and I'm a person with a substance use disorder, and today it's in remission, but if I don't keep doing the same stuff, tomorrow it may not be. And I think that brings up a good point too about peers and peers that are in professional roles, or that are really celebrated in recovery, just how difficult it can be to acknowledge when we're going through tough stuff. And these are conversations that we've had. So, speaking of NADCP and the work with alumni, they adore and so highly respect and you just support alumni, and creating opportunities for alumni. And we've had conversations around how can we support alumni, also by recognizing that they may have rough days too. And how do we make sure that we're checking in, and not putting anyone so far up on a pedestal that they're too afraid to say, I need some help today.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you kind of segued into what I was going to get to next. I was going to say, so alumni and the National Alumni Program or Association. How I know it's kind of been talk for a long time, but how did it start? What was the inception like from
Yeah,
your
so
perspective?
well, NADCP has been connected with alumni as long as it's been in existence, because they just so value the voice of lived experience, and of course that celebrate the successes of treatment court graduates. But Back in 2016, they really moved forward with getting groups of us together from across the country and bringing us to their offices and wanting to learn from us about what it would look like for us across the country to be networking together. And so I believe there were 3 different groups that came in, and this is where some of the relationships began to form because I mean, maybe the internet would have allowed us to do this, but when I think back, to when I started treatment court, that I really didn't have a way to even know about other treatment courts or other treatment court graduates except for those within my very community. And so NADCP really created this opportunity for us to meet graduates from across the country, and that's where relationships began to form and many contacts were made. And additionally, they provided NADCP created other opportunities and would invite alumni in. For example, maybe it would be going to the Capitol to speak to, the legislators or to Congress, or to the White House to speak to the director of opioid response or to the drug czar. Um, and so they were creating opportunities for alumni and again, relationships began to build. Last year, in 2022, there were 5 alumni that were attending conference that were asked to take part in delivery of 6 different, sessions. So these sessions were educational sessions, as you know, that were provided to the attendees and so there were 5 of us that delivered 6 different sessions. And that was really the beginning of this idea that we could be more than just alumni connecting. Like we could really formalize and become an association or a group, right? Like in the early, we didn't even know what it would have been called. I have to give kudos to AKTCA, to Ron Wilson, to Carlos Diaz, to Carlos Gonzalez. They were to Doreen. They were really the early conversation at Rise 22 about, hey, we want this to be more. Um, and at the time, I was elected onto the board of directors for the National Association of Drug Court Professionals as a treatment court alumni. So there was an opportunity, right? Like there, this is where I said I could be a bridge, a voice. Like I could carry the voice of alumni to the board of directors. And Carlos Gonzalez had reached out to me and said, like, we want to meet. We want to start to have some conversations as a group and it was really organic, meaning like we came together really not clear with what exactly it would turn into, but with a passion and a commitment. Like that was where it started, a passion and a commitment, and we kept showing up. And you've been part of these early meetings with the National Treatment Court Alumni Association, and through these meetings, we began to formalize. We developed a vision for this group. We developed a name for the group. We really start to are looking at infrastructure for the group, um, and really moving forward with saying we want to be an association in which we can be a resource to courts and to other alumni across the country for training, for alumni group development, for resource connection, for peer and alumni connection. We want to assist with that. And that's really where we are today. Still in building the infrastructure. We're a group of volunteers. No one's getting paid for this work. Again, we're paid in gratitude. Um, but we're moving towards really formalizing and becoming a standalone. Like this is what we want to be. So it's been an amazing experience, and look where it's taken us.
Yeah, I was absolutely floored, like I said before, when we had that first meeting, just hearing all the different experiences. And I'll backtrack real quick. I was in one of our AC meetings, our advisory committee meetings for AKTCA, and Steve Corbin and a few other guys were like, hey, we're starting up this national alumni group. Who wants to be a part of it? And I was like, you already know me. Like, I want to be the veteran, the veteran voice for the group. And Ron and Michael Meridian were like, come on, let's go. Let's do it. And, it's been a blessing. It's really been a blessing because, once again, I get to look across the country and see that there's people like me that are doing that have the passion, have the fire that I have, and want to promote not just alumni, but this thing that we call recovery, this crazy thing that we call recovery that affects so many of us. And I absolutely just adore every single one of you guys. You guys have kind of lit this spark under me that I've been longing for a long time. And then NADCP, man, I walked out of there and I was like, I'm indestructible. You know what I mean? It was pretty crazy. But yeah, I adore every single one of you guys, from Dina to Christina to Carlos Diaz, the Carloses.
Yeah. Carlos and Carlos.
Yeah, Carlos and Carlos. I feel like that'd be a good podcast name.
I feel like you should do a double, bring in two guests. Yeah.
Yeah. That might be something that we do, Carlos and Carlos on Sitting with Sean. But I absolutely adore the fact that we can all come together and build this program that we have all had bits and pieces that we've pulled from our own individual alumni groups, and to build this thing to make it go into the future and have a voice. You are our voice.
Well, I can help carry it, right?
Yes.
Like, you guys are the voice. I can help carry it. Like, again, I stay really humble, and honestly, in all of the roles I've been in, I will say I have never been more intimidated to be in this role, not because I sit on the board of directors. Like, I'm good at sitting with judges and, like, I'll do that, but it's because I want to carry your voice with integrity. And I've said that to the alumni, and I've said that to the board. Like, this is so important to me to make sure that I'm carrying forward the alumni voice with integrity and clarity. And I want to do that. And that means a lot to me, because you guys mean a lot to me. Alumni mean a lot to me. I mean, we are a group of individuals that were once counted out, that society said we would never make it. Many of us heard that we were a waste of tax dollars, that we shouldn't even try, that we didn't want it, that we weren't going to change. And now look, when we're given an opportunity, when the path was, we had people to walk the path with us, look at what is capable. I keep going back to, there is nothing that is not possible, right? Like, impossible. Like, we are capable of so many things. And this group is just another example of many that shows what is possible in recovery when a group of committed, compassionate individuals come together and say, we want to see things be different, and we're going to, help do things different. And that just fires me up. I love it. I get energy from that.
Yeah, and it's crazy. When I was at NADCP, I was like, oh, I'm just going to be able to stick to the people that I know. The Steve Corbins, the Carlos Diaz's, the Michael Meridians, you guys. And I met some amazing people there. Some amazing alumni, some amazing vet court mentors. I went through that track. That was absolutely insane. And people that I connect with on social media now, like, they see my recovery. People that aren't necessarily in recovery, but are supported. They get to see my recovery and get to see, what I'm doing and what we're doing, because what we're doing is something that is beyond anything that I could ever imagine. And so, God, I can't wait to go to NADCP again. I had such a good time. And a side note, it was the best food that I've ever had in my life.
They always feed us good. And this is where, like, hope comes from. And not just for us as people in recovery or for those that are impacted by substance use disorder, but also for the many professionals. I mean, we know working in this field, working in the helping field, it can be trying and exhausting and heartbreaking. And, when we can inspire hope and, we can show that recovery is possible, that families can be reunited, that we can do and achieve amazing things and change our communities, and others can do that too, right? Like, there are so many others. I tell people, like, I am not unique. There are so many people out there like me. We just have to make sure that we're looking for them and that we're giving opportunity, and we're not limiting opportunity by creating barriers.
Absolutely.
And that's what inspires hope, like, that to for families that have a loved one that is, facing the disease of addiction. It can just be really inspiring to know things can be different. Things can be
Absolutely.
different.
Absolutely. And that's why I adore this podcast. And I love this podcast because at one point I was just like, oh, I'm not going to be able to talk to anybody outside of Alaska because I don't know anybody outside of Alaska. And then one of my first guests was from Nebraska. One of my first guests outside of Alaska was from Nebraska. And next week I interview a guy from Australia.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah. It's going to be insane because I'm going to be up at 4 in the morning. And it's going to be 10 p.m. for him. We got to fit it in when we can. And that's what this is all about. It's about connecting. So it's going to be a lot of coffee.
That's so cool.
But yeah. So before we go, I'd like to ask you if there was somebody that came up to you and said, "Hey, would you give me a suggestion or a piece of advice about recovery? I'm still in my active addiction, or I'm early in recovery. What would you give to them?"
I it won't be anything deep in thought. I think it will just be keep showing up. Like, honestly, like, keep showing up, because we know addiction isolates us. So if someone comes to me and says, like, I'm navigating it, or like I'm still struggling with it, keep staying connected, keep showing up. Like, that's because our addiction doesn't want us to do that. And when you can do that, that's you, like, taking your addiction down. There's so many things I could say as a clinician. Like, there's so many, right? Like, of those clinical things. But when I kept it simple and didn't overthink it, that's what helped me in my early recovery. I kept showing up, I stayed connected, and I told on myself. Those are the things that kept me. Days were rough. Like, it was rough. Like, I was rough up here. Like, there were days it was rough, but I kept showing up. I stayed connected, and I kept telling on myself. And over time, everything else got better, and I was able to, like, just do more and get deeper into my recovery work. But I guess that would be my advice.
Sweet. All right, Abby. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart because I know you're a very busy woman and you wear a lot of hats, and you took time to hang out with me and share your story, share your experience, strength, and hope with me. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for being an amazing example of what recovery looks like. And I still have the coin that you gave me. It's back here. It's right here. It's back here on my coin stand.
Awesome.
Yeah, I got that, and like I brought it home and I looked at my wife and said, "Baby, look what Abby gave me." And she was like, "Oh, that's awesome. It looks like a compass." I was like, "Yeah," and it's just pointing me in the right direction. So, yeah, it stays up there as a memento for me. But yes, I want to thank you for being an amazing example of what recovery looks like, and the success that we can gain from working our program, because you're the epitome of success.
Well, hey, I'm just another bozo on the bus, right? Just another bozo on the
Absolutely.
bus. We got to stay humble. So thanks for having me, Sean. This has been great. And thanks for sharing your recovery and giving opportunities for others to share theirs as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, guys, and everybody that's been watching, I want to thank you for hanging out with us for this almost hour and a half. I told you it was going to fly by. I told you. But thank you, everybody, for watching. And till next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.